The last element I want to cover in a position, or the evaluation of a position, is time. And since chess is a turn-based game, there's always an element of time. White starts off with a time advantage, meaning he's one move ahead of black. And in the opening, white can use this to his advantage, but as time goes on, possibly white can lose this advantage. And this one move advantage is sometimes called the initiative, and it's like the ability to inflict your threats upon your opponent. If you've ever thought that you're playing a game and your opponent is making a threat and you're constantly having to defend, your opponent probably has the initiative. Or when you're playing a game, you're able to sort of like control the flow of the game and inflict threats or threaten the capture material on your opponent, and your opponent has to defend. You probably have the initiative. That's one aspect of time. So the other aspect of time is development, meaning you have to get all you have to get all your pieces out. So development is actually it's material and time together. And why is time an important factor? Well, I've already mentioned initiative. The initiative is a valuable thing to have because it allows you to somewhat control the flow of the game and inflict your will upon your opponent. The other thing about time is when it comes down to planning. You have to let's say you're making a plan, and then you have to look at your opponent's moves, and you have to if you tell yourself, well, it's going to take me 6 moves to carry out my plan, and then you say, well, how many moves can my opponent make to defend that plan? And if he only has to make 2 moves, well, maybe your plan isn't so good. I remember playing a game once and having one of the upper members of the club come over and tell me the reason I lost I chose the improper strategy is I chose a strategy which was too slow. So he was actually telling me that the reason my plan did not work in that circumstance is that it was the element of time. I needed a faster plan, and he showed me a faster plan. So that's time. But the position I have here, I want to show, I'll show one aspect of time. I know that might have been my lecture on time, really. And maybe I'll recap it in the end, but here's a position I want to maybe analyze again from the elements of position evaluation, which are, and I put them up here, tactics, material, king safety, piece activity, and time. So tactics, so are there available tactics in this position? And it's a white to move, I forgot to say that. And there is an available tactic which white should seriously consider. It's a bishop takes e6. So that is one possible tactic. So that's something that white should consider. And what about material? Well, actually, if you count up the pieces, black is actually a pawn up, but the tactic of bishop takes e6, white's going to win a pawn plus more. What about the other factors of king safety? Well, obviously, white's king is pretty safe. It's missing a pawn here in its pawn shield, but it's pretty safe. It's castled. So it's relatively safe. Now, the black king is not so safe, though, because it's about ready to get cracked open by bishop takes e6, and it can't castle because black controls this diagonal right here. So the king is not very safe at all. Next factor, piece activity. Well, look at white's pieces. They're pretty active. This white bishop here is quite active. It's actually going to be engaged in a tactic. This bishop is preventing black from castling. This knight is defending and can easily jump into the battle. Where black's pieces, this white bishop here isn't doing too much. It's looking over into here in this side, but there isn't really too much over on that side. It can't really, it really can't, well, it can move to various places, like here, here, and here, and here. It just get captured, so it's not very, actually, while it can move, its mobility or its effectiveness is not really good. Maybe this comes down to coordination. It can move, but it's not really coordinated with anything. And this bishop here has not moved at all. Even though it does have this diagonal here, it can move to. Well, it can at least just move to here. Or it probably should just move. I don't know. Well, if it moves to here, bishop would just, white would just take it and force the king in the center. And neither hasn't, neither the rooks have moved over to help, fight. So as you can tell, sort of black is behind the 8-ball, and as you can tell, maybe I can say all of white's forces are developed where black's is not. So it's actually behind in development, which is going to take black time. So black is going to have to spend a couple of moves developing, and white can use these moves to attack. So what's happened is black is behind in development and effectively time. So it's going to have to waste time, or maybe not waste time, but spend time developing. And that's what I wanted to get to for that portion of time. But we could also look at the other elements of the position to see how white also has an advantage. It just doesn't. It does have a disadvantage in material, but it does have better king safety, piece activity, which is in the form of both piece mobility and piece coordination, and I would actually say control of the center too. It's also and in terms of time, it also has an advantage in time. So let me again just restate, and let me pop up something on the screen. So maybe I've broken down time, which was the focus of this lecture, into the initiative, which hopefully I spelled that right, which is your ability to reflect your plans upon your opponent. Development of your pieces, because developing your pieces takes time, and you can be ahead in development, which is really a lead in development, a lead in time. And you can also break down time into the number of moves for attack or defense. This happens maybe later in the game when you're trying to figure out a plan or different plans, and you're trying to figure out maybe the best plan, and I've done this to see which way, sometimes how the pieces will move. You need to move different pieces around, and sometimes you can figure out an actual plan which is one move shorter, and that is probably the better plan. Because it's going to take it's going to give your opponent one less move to be able to defend it. And we also analyzed the various elements in this position here. Okay, so I'll move on to the next lecture.